Good morning. My name is Balpreet Singh. I'm legal counsel and spokesperson for the World Sikh Organization of Canada. And I'm speaking today alongside with Moninder Singh, who's the spokesperson for the BC Gurdwaras Council, as well as Sikh Federation Canada. And we're here on behalf of a collective of Sikh organizations, which include the Ontario Gurdwaras Committee, the BC Gurdwaras Council, the Sikh Federation Canada, Quebec Sikh Council, and the World Sikh Organization of Canada. So just today, Global News has reported that a suspected agent of the government of India linked to the criminal Bishnoi gang was actively surveilling Jagmeet Singh, then a sitting MP and leader of a federal party, right here in Canada. And the credible risk to Jagmeet Singh's life prompted a duty to warn and active police protection. So let's let that sink in. India targeted a Canadian politician on Canadian soil. That's absolutely unprecedented. As far as we're concerned, that's an act of war. What other Canadian politician or leader has to carry the burden of representing his constituents, his party, but also protecting themselves from foreign assassination plots? And that raises a question in our community. If Jagmeet Singh, who is the highest profile Sikh in Canada, isn't safe, then what does that mean for the rest of us? And this isn't a one-off. It's the latest and the most brazen in a chapter of transnational oppression directed by India at Sikhs in Canada. In October of last year, you may recall that the RCMP confirmed that Indian agents were involved in multiple homicides, extortions, shootings, all targeted at Sikh Canadians. And that same day, Canada expelled 6 Indian diplomats who were suspected of being involved in these crimes. We later learned from Canada's Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs that Narendra Modi's inner circle, specifically Amit Shah, the Home Minister, personally ordered this campaign of terror, which involved gathering intelligence through India's diplomatic network and working with the Bishnoi gang, who was named in this Jagmeet Singh situation, to orchestrate violence. I'll point out to you that the Bishnoi gang, as recently as last month, took responsibility for the murder of a Sikh businessman in Mississauga. Today, well over a dozen Sikh Canadians continue to live with active duty to warn threats, and that means there's credible threats against their lives, and those threats originate from India. And despite all of this, Prime Minister Mark Carney has invited Narendra Modi to the G7 summit without any assurances that India will stop targeting Canadian Sikhs, without any cooperation on the ongoing criminal investigations, and without a single public concession, without anything about foreign interference that targets our electoral systems, our governments, our citizens. If targeting a Canadian political leader on Canadian soil isn't enough to be barred from entering Canada, then where is our red line? Where do we draw that line? In fact, it seems there is no red line when it comes to our community. It's telling Sikh Canadians that our lives simply don't matter. It says that even when we're targeted for killing by India, and our government knows that the highest level of the Indian government, including Narendra Modi's inner circle, is involved in making these hits, we will still roll out the red carpet and welcome the leader of that government. This isn't a betrayal just of our community. This is a betrayal of Canada's core values of sovereignty, self-determination, justice, and the rule of law. So today, on behalf of Sikh organizations across Canada, we are making some concrete calls for action. Those 3 demands are, firstly, that a public inquiry into India's foreign interference and transnational oppression be held. Secondly, intelligence sharing agreements with India and any intelligence sharing should immediately be cancelled. And finally, the invitation to Narendra Modi to the G7 summit should be withdrawn unless India cooperates with Canadian law enforcement in the ongoing investigations and pledges to no longer interfere in Canada and to no longer target Sikhs in Canada. But I want us to understand this isn't just a Sikh issue, and that's really been the pain. At least 3 murders in Canada, extortions, shootings, now targeting a federal political leader. This doesn't compare to foreign interference by any other country. And if we allow one community like ours to be targeted like this, it means every Canadian's at risk. We can't afford the double standards that we're seeing, and we have to take a strong stand, just like we've done with China, Russia, Iran. For India, this isn't just an invitation, it's a capitulation. And that's the way it's been framed in the Indian media. This means it's open season on Sikhs in Canada. It's embarrassing for Canada, and it's dangerous for Sikh Canadians. So I'll close with this, that this is a moment that called for courage. We cannot bend over backwards for India. We need our government to start standing up for justice, for accountability, and the safety of all Canadian Sikhs, as well as all Canadians. I'm going to pass it over to Moninder Singh, who's going to give his remarks as well.
Good morning. My name is Moninder Singh. I'm the national spokesperson for Sikh Federation Canada and also the spokesperson for the BC Gurdwaras Council. I'd like to start off by giving some context as to why Mr. Modi and his decades-long history is so problematic for this invitation, not only over the last 2 years, but it's important to understand that those of us that live with these duty to warns, myself having multiple duty to warns over the last several years, that this is not just an insult, it's adding insult to injury, where the loss of Balpreet Singh in 2023 and his political assassination by the hands of the agents of the government of India. I think those are the things that we have to really understand as we're kind of walking through this process of what we've learned today about Jagmeet Singh. The surveillance, the live tracking, that is a norm that's unfortunately become a part of the life of many dozens of Sikh activists in this country. In 2002, Mr. Modi was the Chief Minister of the Indian state of Gujarat. Violence broke out that was state-sponsored. Thousands of Muslims in that minority were murdered in cold blood, rape, arson, looting, all of that took place. Mr. Modi was then banned from the United States due to his role in that violence. He was denied entry under the International Religious Freedom Act. Section 212 of his visa was revoked. And that visa was revoked according to the Immigration and National Act. It bars foreign officials responsible for severe violations of religious freedom. And in 2005, he was not allowed entry. And now we look at a few decades later, and the red carpet is being rolled out for an individual that not only is committing violence in Canada, but has a long history of this type of genocidal violence as well. I think India, in and of itself, when we look at what we see from there, there's intelligence sharing agreements that we're talking about. Intelligence sharing agreements with Canada allow Sikh activists to be tracked, surveilled, pinpointed, their families back home in Punjab harassed. So these security intelligence agreements are not only impacting Sikh lives here in Canada, but they're also impacting their families back home in Punjab, where the Modi regime in its authoritarian state has been known to not only incarcerate, but also torture and make people disappear through various means and staged fake encounters as well. India's press faces the same threat as well. India is ranked 151st out of 180 countries when it comes to press freedom. Multiple journalists are killed every year in India. There's things from Kashmir to the Farmers Act to the Citizenship Act. Every single time, journalists and reporters and media have been subdued by this Modi regime. And Reporters Without Borders has gone far as to say that India's media has fallen into an unofficial state of emergency since Narendra Modi came to power in 2014, with an average of 2 to 3 journalists killed due to their work every year. That work includes reporting on Kashmir, the farmers' protest coverage, journalists facing criminal charges, including sedition, for reporting on the death of a protester at the hands of Indian state paramilitary in 2021. Due to this environment of harassment and danger, India's media at best is pro-Modi and Hindutva propaganda, which villainizes minority groups and plants the seeds to attack them in a justifiable and necessary means under the guise of national security. When we understand how India operates in its authoritarian state and how that violence has now been exported to Canada, the assassination of Balpreet Singh was linked to the agents of the government of India. Canadian law enforcement confirmed clandestine operations by Indian agents here in Canada, including extortion and intimidation of Sikh activists, especially those of us that advocate for an independent Khalistan. Modi has openly stated that this new India will now go into the homes of those abroad and kill them there. And I don't think we can understand a state any better than that when their Prime Minister is actually saying that we will go into the homes of those dissidents, those that are actually forming any type of legitimate dissent in foreign countries, especially a country like Canada that has freedoms under its charter, that we will go into their homes and kill them, and they've actually done that. The expulsion of Indian diplomats in October of 2024, when Foreign Minister Melanie Joly announced the expulsion of 6 Indian diplomats due to their involvement in a targeted campaign of violence against Canadian citizens. And make no mistake, these are Canadian citizens. The expelled individuals included Sanjay Kumar Verma, India's High Commissioner to Canada at the time. The highest level of representation India has in Canada was expelled for a campaign of violence against Canadians on Canadian soil. Extortion has continued, intimidation has continued, threats have continued, but the Sikh community remains resilient, will not bow down or go silent to these types of threats and extortion and acts of violence. We will continue on, but the question really lies in the fact that what will Canada do? How will it protect its citizens? How will it protect its freedoms? And how will it ensure that its sovereignty is not undermined? Just yesterday, a Hindu businessman in the lower mainland of Vancouver, Satwinder Sharma, was shot and killed in his business. Just recently, just a few hours ago, the responsibility for that murder was taken by elements of Indian gangs that are operating in India who have openly on social media claimed responsibility for that killing. So this violence is going nowhere. And in October, if we have Indian diplomats that were expelled for this very extortion and murder and violence, we're inviting the Prime Minister of that country, who actually has those Indian agents under their security agencies like RAW that report directly to his office. How are we actually thinking that this individual does not know what is happening? On the contrary, this order, these violent killings, these violent extortions are all actually, in our opinion, coming from that office itself under Mr. Modi's, Amit Shah's, and that inner circle's orders. So this is an issue of Canadian sovereignty and not one of just the Sikh community. It's definitely not one of some type of row between the Hindu and Sikh community. This is something that communities in Canada need to be safe from, this type of violence and transnational repression from foreign powers like India. Finally, I'd like to just comment on why Mr. Modi's invitation here should not have happened in the first place. Inviting Mr. Modi now legitimizes India's actions. It included political assassination, suppression of dissent, and the interference in Canadian affairs, as through the Hohe Commission has already reported out. Canada has credible evidence linking Indian agents to Mr. Nijjar's assassination, yet Modi's government has refused to cooperate with the investigations. The G7 is a platform for democratic nations committed to human rights. India's actions directly contradict these principles, as I've stated. Canada has to send a clear message right now. It will not tolerate foreign interference, nor will it reward a government that targets Canadian citizens on Canadian soil for their political beliefs. India is not a viable trade partner or counterweight to China. This is an illusion. India has proven to be volatile and fragile and not trustworthy or sustainable in this environment due to these political assassinations and the ongoing campaigns of transnational repression, with the murder of Mr. Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Canada, with the attempted assassination of Gurdwaras Singh Pannu in the United States, and the ongoing violence in the forms of extortion and killings of Sikh business persons, and now, especially now, the actual attacks on other communities that are in Canada as well. So in conclusion, Canada has to stand firm against transnational repression and protect Sikh activists and all Canadian citizens from state-sponsored threats. The government has to reconsider Mr. Modi's invitation and rescind and demand full accountability from India. This is not just about Sikh activists, it's about Canada's sovereignty, its democracy, and its commitment to human rights. We must not allow political expediency to override justice. Canada must act decisively in this moment, uphold its values, and protect its citizens. Thank you.
How do you think the current government compares to the previous one when it comes to tackling foreign interference and transnational repression?
So the previous government took a stand that was principled, and it was direct. It was that you cannot do this on Canadian soil. When Prime Minister Carney was asked about it, he waffled. He said, well, that's a police investigation, and we have to think about supply chains. So for us, this felt like a betrayal. And I want to point one thing out to you. The individuals who face duties to warn, including now Jagmeet Singh, do not receive any police protection. In fact, when these duties to warn are given, You're allowed to read the piece of paper, they take it back from you, and they literally ask you, who do you think's threatening you? This is ridiculous. And I can tell you from a source that's close to Jagmeet Singh that now he's been told that he will not receive police protection if a further threat arises. That's absolutely unacceptable.
I think just to add to that, as somebody that has been dealing with these threats of violence through these duty to warns, I think the previous government and this government, in that sense of the duty to warns, there is no difference. I think there's a principled stand in September of 2023 when Prime Minister Trudeau, along with Jagmeet Singh at the time, stood in Parliament and actually condemned India for what they had done and made that public. So that was, in my mind, a very principled stand that was taken at that moment. That continued on with the expulsion of diplomats. There was a strong line that was being towed. The diplomatic row that continued from there, Canada was not backing down. And to see that within a month of the last election, all these promises that were made before the election, and then afterwards seeing almost complete U-turns from every political party except for the NDP, which has stood its ground firmly on this issue. I think we do have a problem where we're seeing trade and economic ties that are now overriding human rights and the lives of Canadian citizens and their safety.
Can I ask, I think it was in 2019, some Gurdwaras took the step banning Liberal members of Parliament from coming over concerns about how the government was addressing this issue. And I wonder if that's a step you'd be prepared to take again, if the invitation is not rescinded, for example, or something.
I can actually comment on that because I was the one who actually put that out. It is under consideration. It has been talked about. We want to make sure that the government does the right thing. And what relationship do we have if our lives and the lives of our community members are going to be put at risk? We open up our Gurdwaras to anyone. Anyone can come there. Anyone can meet with the community. They can pay their respects. Or they can just come and learn about who the Sikh people are in Canada and around the world. But it is not a place for people to actually take a political stage if they're going to jeopardize the lives of our activists, our community members, our business people, our children. That's just not acceptable. So I think everything is on the table going forward, that we won't back down from this issue. Once Mr. Modi arrives and he leaves, this won't be an issue that just goes away with him. For us, it's a deep sense of betrayal at the moment, and we want to see some concrete action on this as well. So it's definitely something along with many other opportunities that might be on the table.
What have you heard? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Moninder, since you've had duties to warn, when Jagmeet Singh was talking about his duty to warn at the end of the election, he said that the implication was it came from a foreign government. He said the RCMP did give him information on the origin of the threat. Is that similar to what you've experienced?
Absolutely. What we get is very little information. Usually you get a very late night visit. The conversation is swift. You're told that there is a duty to warn against you of imminent assassination is the terms that have been used with me every time I've received one. I've also had situations, and my children are younger, so either it's me at home or children and family services show up. So either you stay at home or your children stay at home. So we actually don't know where the threat comes from, but it leads to many different implications on someone's life. And I think that is something to take into consideration as well, that we don't know where the threat is coming from. As Balpreet Singh stated, people have been asked, do you know or do you think you know where this threat is coming from? Well, it's like, well, you're the ones giving us the duty to warn. We would expect you to maybe tell us. So we really feels like a duty to warn feels like just a shifting of liability. Like, we've told you, here's the fine print, now it's up to you. And it just feels like you're left to your own and you have no other support or guidance in that moment. So it's never been actually said that agents of the Government of India, but I have received duty to warns, I can say, from the INSET division of the RCMP, which primarily deals with international type issues and threats. And after the murder of Mr. Nijjar, because we received our duty to warns for the first time together in July of 2022, that I firmly believe, and I have no doubt in my mind, it is India, but the RCMP has never actually provided that information.
What have you heard from Liberal MPs who you've raised issues about this visit with?
So both our organizations had meetings yesterday with MPs. We, of course, know that Sukh Dhaliwal has taken a strong stand. Gurbaksh Saini has also spoken out. I think anyone who's Sikh appreciates the threat that exists. And I think even if they're not speaking out, they understand. They know that this was the wrong decision. But this is politics. And so some of them have expressed their inability to speak out publicly. But everyone knows how wrong this is. I can't stress enough, this is the leader of a political party in Canada being surveilled for an assassination. How worse does it get? And what needs to happen for Canada to wake up, for our government to take this seriously? Like, what more needs to happen? Do we need to have more dead people on the streets? And that's what hurts.
Sikh leadership within the Carney government, like Mr. Sarai or prominent Sikh members of the opposition caucus, are refusing to speak out because politics. I wonder if you could reflect on that. I mean, it is their moment to take a stand. Why say, oh, it's just politics?
I think I'd go further to say that as in just because they're of Sikh background, it shouldn't really matter. We have expectations from them because they are members of the community and they're seeing their community, so they have a deeper tie with the community. But when the issue is underlying is of Canadian sovereignty, like India meddles in our elections, they meddle in our democratic institutions, they meddle in our academia, they meddle in our media, they meddle everywhere, and that's been proven in the Hague Commission for Foreign Interference. So our expectation is the same, whether it's a Sikh background politician or anyone. What are you doing to protect the sovereignty of this country? What would we do in the case if this was China? Would people speak out? I think you would have tons of people speaking out. I think if it was Iran, if it was the Saudis, if it was somebody else, Russia, I think we see people from all walks and all backgrounds speaking openly. When it comes to India, it's either the leadership of these political parties that is muzzling, and we've seen that in the past election as well, their own MPs not allowing them to speak, and they're towing a particular line, or there are some people, I will give this, there are some people in the Sikh community that are MPs that may feel that what has happened to Jagmeet may happen to them. And that is even more dangerous for our political system, that if our elected officials are going to bow to the pressure of a foreign government, thinking they're being intimidated, threatened, or potentially, in Jagmeet's case, potentially assassinated, then we have a huge problem on our hands, and I think we need to look at it that way.
Balpreet, when we spoke last week, just immediately after Prime Minister Modi talked about receiving his invite from Prime Minister Carney to come to the G7, when I asked if you were going to reach back out to the PMO to just share your issues directly with the Prime Minister's office, you said, what's the point at that time? Has your stance changed at all in the last few days, or is it still you just don't see a point in reaching out directly to the PMO?
So our letter to the PM, Prime Minister Carney, went out on May 21st. And we know they've received it. They haven't replied. So in all honesty, I don't see a point in reaching out again. I know that at least over 1,000 Sikh Canadians that I'm aware of have emailed their MPs as well as the Prime Minister's office. And we've received some responses from MPs. But they know what's going on. And if they choose to ignore us, then I'm not going to dignify that with another letter. And one thing, just speaking to a private conversation I had, I spoke to a Sikh in politics. I'm not going to give any more details than that. And I said, speaking out at this time is important. In fact, will ensure that these threats are neutralized. And the answer I got was chilling. He said, Jagmeet got targeted because he spoke out. Why would anyone put themselves in that position?
I mean, the government officials and some Liberal MPs have said that in order to make progress on this, in order to encourage human rights and to make the case, these high-level talks between Modi and between Prime Minister Carney will make a difference, that if it comes from that top level. Do you buy that?
The history would say no. What Mr. Modi and Modi's inner circle have continued to do. Bilateral relations between countries take place. We're well aware of that as well. The invitation to Mr. Modi on June 6th, when Sikhs around the world are commemorating the 1984 June genocide, on that particular day was very insensitive. Then you have the G7 that's running up from June 14th to approximately the 17th, which is bumping up against June 18th, which is the actual assassination day of Mr. Nijjar. That is very insensitive. These types of conversations could be had elsewhere. These types of conversations should have very strict boundaries around them as to how they can happen and what the actual outcomes could be, rather than we're rolling out a red carpet for an individual that's going to come for basically a 2-day summit retreat, drink and eat and go home. Like, to us, that just seems like a huge betrayal in these moments, in these days leading up to 2 years when the Sikh community is commemorating 2 major events, especially in Canada, that how is it that this insensitivity is shown in this moment? So I think there's definitely a pathway for conversation. That's never not going to happen. But I think what's happened now is that it's just shown that how quickly we've made a U-turn. Inviting Mr. Modi at this time was the wrong decision. Having this conversation without clear-cut public statements. We ran a public inquiry. We had a public safety committee that sat down in October of 2024 around violence and agents of the government of India committing those acts of violence in Canada. So basically the question starts popping up in our minds, what was the last year and a half for? Like, the last government did all this work. Within 1 month, it feels like it's being completely reversed. The slate is being wiped clean, and we're going to be right back where we were just over 2 years ago, where activists in our community and the broader community and these extortions and everything else is going to go back to what it was, which is horrible. It doesn't allow people to live their lives in Canada. It doesn't allow for the Charter, your freedoms of expression and speech, those to be enacted in any which way. So I think for all those reasons, I think these meetings can happen, but they have to have boundaries. They have to have clear-cut objectives. And we haven't seen any of that on the table except for this idea of law enforcement dialogue will continue between the two countries. And the way the Sikh community feels is that that law enforcement dialogue has basically been Canada saying cooperate and India basically, for a lack of better words, raising the middle finger and walking away every single time. And that is not acceptable. And the second part of that law enforcement dialogue is India feeds Canada information, India feeds propaganda, India feeds them with like false information. And we have been taking this information almost verbatim since Mr. Modi has come into power. The 2018 report on Sikh Khalistani extremism as a threat to Canada, the report that was mentioned earlier, that report, how is it that that report could be put in place? Sikh Khalistani extremism could be added in, and then because a community who said in the absence of evidence, you will be barred from our stages and our places of gathering, and the government of Canada removes the reference. So there was no evidence in our minds. It was all propaganda that was being fed through India. It was all what happened in February of 2018 when Prime Minister Trudeau went to India, and he was basically ridiculed there, and then he was into signing these security and intelligence sharing agreements, which have had ramifications up until the present day for the Sikh community and others as well. I think for all those reasons, I have a lot to say on that topic of how this should have happened, but I'll stop there as to this was the worst way it could have happened, and that's why we're here today.
Mr. Carney has basically said he's not planning on rescinding the invitation at this point, so is there anything he can say to allay any of your fears or concerns if Modi still is planning on coming?
So we have made 3 demands, and the other 2 are an inquiry into India's transnational oppression, and the second is, of course, looking at all of that information and canceling the intelligence sharing agreements that India has with Canada. So if steps are taken to show that Canada, our government, recognizes the threats and is willing to take steps to neutralize those threats, that will go a long ways towards assuaging, towards helping us deal with this situation. But otherwise, the way this has been portrayed in the Indian media is a complete capitulation. And in fact, you have senior editors, I'll just say it, the editor of the First Post, it's an Indian media outlet, who has said that we will kill Khalistanis in Canada and there's nothing you can do without it. And he ended that tweet with the word cope. This is an open call for killing, and that's how it's being understood. So I think Prime Minister Carney is perhaps naive when he thinks that having dialogue with India will bear great fruits. We've seen this play out many times through many prime ministers, and without strong action, without actual concrete announcements and requirements, nothing changes. It gets worse.
You spoke about having young children. I was wondering if you can talk about the impact of the duty to warn on your life and what you've had to do in order to deal with it.
I think anyone in this position, so it's not just me, maybe I'm speaking on all of their behalf. There's more than a dozen individuals in our community that are dealing with these duty to warns. But when you do have young children that are minors, you have no choice but either to leave your home or the children have to be removed from the home because of that threat. Living in that kind of environment, the impact on the children is severe, unfortunately. So, you know, for months at a time when you're out of the home, you come back. You know, we had to come to a point where we had to speak to Children and Family Services and think about what is actually, we have to take on the risk then. So the psychological harm to the children versus what we need to do as a family to ensure that they're safe, and then, you know, in this case, their father, myself, is safe. And we have to kind of come up with that, and we had to talk to the RCMP and Children and Family Services and come up with a bit of a plan as to how that could work. And then after almost 4 or 5 months out of the home, I was allowed to come back. But the impact of seeing everything in the media and seeing what's happening to our community, I think from that perspective, it has a deep impact on kids in our community. But it's not just the families of those that have duty to warns. You have active people in the community, in our community here, whose kids are now asking these questions to their parents when they, you know, go to rallies or they go to protests or they just go to the Gurdwara. Our kids are seeing this stuff on social media. They see that Sikhs and Sikh leadership is being targeted, and they have these questions in their minds now as to what the value of life is in Canada for them. And that has never happened as being born and raised in this country and growing up here and establishing our life here, family being here since like the early 70s, grandfathers being here in the 1930s as well, before going back to Punjab. There is a deep connection for the Sikh community here in Canada. We have a settler history just like most of the rest of Canadians, but we call this place home. So when our children are now growing up in an environment where they're not sure what their value of their community's life is, as Balpreet Singh has stated as well, that is hugely problematic. And I think that is something that, you know, I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm not asking for anything except for that India should be checked. No country should be able to come into Canada, undermine its sovereignty, its democratic institutions, put their citizens at risk. That's the ask. If we do that, if we do the public inquiry, understand India better, we have an opportunity to actually thwart that threat. If we cancel these security sharing agreements with India and intel sharing with them, they don't have information where they can actually surveil people like Jagmeet Singh or other Sikh activists. Jagmeet Singh, while he was in politics, had a security detail. He could move around. He had protection. The other Sikh activists don't. You move around constantly looking over your shoulder. You want to make sure that you're not in overly public environments where other people could be harmed if you're going to be harmed. So to your question, that every aspect of your life changes. You can't go to your kid's school, you can't go to their practices, you can't go to family events, you avoid weddings, you avoid any type of family gatherings, public spaces. That's the impact it has, and it automatically will have an impact on the children in the community, but also, I think, on the greater kind of sense of living in Canada and what Canada was supposed to be about.
What indication, if any, have you received that the government is hearing your concerns and maybe taking them seriously, if you've gotten any indication?
So speaking with Liberal MPs, we know that a meeting took place yesterday where the concerns were relayed. We're hearing that they trust the Prime Minister and they understand that progress has to be made on this file, but frankly, it's all wishy-washy. It's all up in the air, and we've heard this before. So without the concrete steps that we've described, there's really nothing to assure us that this is being taken seriously. And I just keep going back to the same thing. Jagmeet Singh is a Canadian political leader. He's born and raised in Canada. I'm born and raised in Canada. Moninder Singh's born and raised in Canada. This is a Canadian issue, but it doesn't feel as though this is being treated like a Canadian issue. It's being treated as though it's just those brown people, it's just the Sikhs. And, you know, if a foreign government's killing them, or threatening them, or surveilling them, it's okay. We'll invite the Prime Minister and, you know, we'll have a weekend in the mountains and we'll chat. That's not how you would approach a threat from any other foreign country. So it's disappointing.
Sorry, if I could just add, what we've heard, just like Balpreet was saying, what we've heard is that, you know, we trust the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has set foreign interference and transnational repression as part of the agenda. And we're going to trust the Prime Minister to go in and have that conversation. We have no trust in India. What Prime Minister Carney does now will basically dictate whether there is any trust going forward in himself and his government. So I think there's an opportunity for him to do something at the G7, but not something that's going to be wishy-washy, not something that's going to remain behind closed doors, something that has to come out to the Canadian public and actually talk about what is the conversation that was had. Did Mr. Modi agree to anything that we have put forward? Are they going to cooperate in the investigation? Are they going to take responsibility for what they have done and are continuously doing here in Canada by inflicting this violence on Canadian soil? And if the answer is that, well, he wasn't agreeing to anything, and we're going to continue on with our economic relationship anyways, well, I think that would be not only a betrayal to the Sikh community, but I think it would be a betrayal to Canada, its core values, and its commitment to human rights as well.
Last question, guys.
Will you be protesting? Will Sikh organizations be protesting the arrival of Modi, his presence at the G7?
I think there's multiple sites for protests that are in and around the Kananaskis area, in Banff and Calgary, so there are planned protests that will be happening there. On Saturday here at Parliament Hill, June 14th at 12 p.m., there are buses that will be rolling in from Toronto and Montreal from the Sikh community. Other communities as well will be joining in. We're expecting anywhere in 500 to 1,000 or more people that will be on Parliament Hill for that event. That is basically in our minds an anti-Modi rally to take place. Basically to talk about what's happening there. And there, with the gathering of that many community members, there may be more further steps that we take and announce them there as we kind of move into the week of G7. So there are definitely protests that are being planned in multiple areas, and in Vancouver as well. On June 15th, there is a protest that's happening in Surrey. It's actually the weekend that's starting up to Mr. Nidger's programs in commemoration of his life and his assassination. And on June 15th, something's happening in Surrey as well. So I think we're seeing them pop up across the country organically. But the ones that we've planned out as these 5 Sikh organizations, that is in Ottawa on June 14th, where we expect several hundred, if not 1,000 Sikhs to show up and protest Mr. Modi's arrival in Canada.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you.